You've heard of the Titanic, right? That gigantic ship that sank in 1912? Well, let me tell you about its less famous brother, Britannic. Just imagine, back in the early 20th century, the White Star Line was building not just one, but three spectacular ships. The Britannic was one of them, and the idea was that it would be even safer and more luxurious than the Titanic. Unfortunately, his story took a very different turn, marked by war and mystery. The Britannic began its journey as a hope of luxury, but ended up becoming a hospital ship during the First World War. It transported wounded soldiers and was a true colossus of the sea, with more than 3,000 hospital beds on board. Everything seemed to be going well until that fateful morning of November 21, 1916, when a mysterious explosion, probably a mine, sent him to the bottom of the Aegean Sea in less than an hour. The most curious thing? Unlike the Titanic, the Britannic sank in calmer, warmer waters, and thanks to safety improvements, most of those on board were able to survive. But 30 souls were not so lucky, and the fate of this giant of the seas remained a mystery until famous explorer Jacques Cousteau found it in the 1970s. The Britannic may not be as famous as her sister, but her story is full of lessons and curiosities that continue to fascinate sea and history lovers. Let's go back in time to the early 20th century, when the White Star Line was planning something grand. You remember the Titanic, right? Well, it was part of a trio of ships, and the Britannic was the last to be built. Just imagine, after the Titanic's tragedy in 1912, everyone was focused on building a ship that was even safer and more impressive. It was a true race to create the most luxurious and innovative ocean liner of the seas. The construction of the Britannic began on November 30, 1911, at the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast, Northern Ireland. These guys already had a good reputation, but the responsibility was enormous now. The Britannic was designed to be a marvel of naval engineering, almost like a bigger and more robust older brother of the Titanic. It was larger, over 270 meters long, and much heavier, reaching 48,000 tons. A true floating fortress. With the Titanic disaster fresh in mind, the people at White Star Line and the engineers were obsessed with improving the safety of the Britannic. The ship was equipped with double hulls and much more advanced watertight compartment systems. Oh, and remember the shortage of lifeboats on the Titanic? Well, the Britannic had more than enough, so that no one would ever be without a lifeboat in an emergency again. They really didn't want to make the same mistakes twice. The original intention was to make the Britannic the most luxurious ocean liner of its time, with jaw-dropping first-class accommodations. It would be a floating palace, with fancy restaurants, magnificent salons, and even an indoor pool. However, all these plans were set aside when World War I broke out in 1914. The world was changing, and so was the fate of the Britannic. The ship was not yet ready to sail as a luxury liner, but soon would have a crucial role to play in a completely different scenario. And then, you can imagine how things started to get complicated. Before it even made its maiden voyage, the Britannic was requisitioned by the British government to serve as a hospital ship. All that planned luxury? It was replaced by hospital beds and operating rooms, ready to attend to wounded soldiers on the front. It was a new chapter for the Britannic, which never got the chance to showcase all its pomp and splendor to the world. But that's not the whole story yet. We have much more to explore about how the Britannic transformed during the war and, of course, the mystery of its tragic sinking. But for now, this is the incredible journey of its construction and design. It sounds like an epic tale, don't you think? Now that the Britannic was ready, fate had very different plans for it. Do you remember that it was planned to be the most luxurious ocean liner in the world? Well, forget about that for a moment. With the outbreak of World War I in 1914, the Britannic was requisitioned by the British government for a much nobler but also more challenging mission, to be a hospital ship. In November 1915, it was officially converted for military service and renamed HMHS Britannic, His Majesty's Hospital Ship Britannic. And so began its second life. Imagine the transformation. All those sumptuous lounges and luxury cabins gave way to rows of hospital beds and state-of-the-art medical facilities. The ship now had the capacity to accommodate more than 3,300 patients, as well as surgical rooms, pharmacies, and everything necessary to care for wounded soldiers coming from the front. The Britannic became a true floating hospital, prepared to navigate dangerous seas and face the challenges of war. Its mission was clear and crucial: to transport wounded British soldiers from the battlefields of the Middle East back home. The Britannic operated primarily in the Mediterranean Sea, traveling between the United Kingdom and places like Turkey and Greece. It was part of the so-called Dardanelles Corridor, an extremely important and dangerous route at the time, as many ships faced attacks from enemy submarines and sea mines. During its missions, the Britannic stood out for its efficiency and safety. It made several successful trips, proving to be a vital part of the British war machine. Just imagine, a ship that was designed to carry the rich and famous was now bringing relief and hope to those who needed it most. Even during such difficult times, the Britannic was a marvel in action. It was able to sail quickly, and its size provided a safe space for doctors and nurses to work. Each journey was a complex operation, with medical teams caring for the wounded while navigating waters filled with dangers. Despite the circumstances, the atmosphere on board was one of dedication and courage. The healthcare professionals aboard the Britannic worked tirelessly to save lives, often in adverse and challenging conditions. However, war is unforgiving, and the tension was constant. Everyone knew they were sailing in a war zone, and the fear of enemy attacks was always present. The Britannic, despite being a hospital ship and bearing the Red Cross that theoretically would protect it from attacks, was not immune to the danger of mines and German submarines prowling the Mediterranean. So despite all of the Britannic's success and importance in military service, there was always a cloud of uncertainty hanging over its missions. It was clear that, although it was a hospital ship, it was not exempt from the brutal risks of war. And it was exactly this invisible threat that would define the final fate of the Britannic. This chapter in the Britannic's life is a mixture of grandeur and gravity. It illustrates how the ship served as a true anchor of hope amid the chaos of war. But, as we will see in the next part, the sea had its own plans for this giant of the oceans. But first, I need to ask you: are you enjoying? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos and leave a like. So we come to the final and most exciting chapter in the Britannic's story. We already know that she was a ship designed to be the height of luxury, but she ended up becoming a war hero as a hospital ship. However, the Britannic's fate was about to be sealed in an unexpected and tragic way. It was a sunny morning on November 21, 1916. The Britannic was on one of her regular routes through the Aegean Sea, heading from Naples to the island of Lemnos, with plans to pick up more wounded soldiers. Everything seemed calm, almost routine for the crew, but the calm would soon turn to chaos. At around 8:12 a.m., a powerful explosion rocked the ship. What caused this explosion? This question still resonates in many debates. The most widely accepted theory is that the Britannic hit a sea mine planted by a German submarine, although some believe that she may have been hit by a torpedo. Either way, the explosion was devastating. Unlike the Titanic, which took about 2.5 hours to sink, the Britannic began to sink quickly. The giant ship was listing alarmingly, with water rushing in at a terrifying rate. The scene on board was one of urgency, but also eerily calm. Safety protocols had been quickly put in place, thanks to lessons learned from the Titanic disaster. The crew knew that time was short. The Britannic's captain, Charles Bartlett, who already had a reputation as an exceptional sailor, ordered the engines shut down and began maneuvering the ship to run aground on a nearby island, hoping to avoid the worst. But the damage had already been done, and the Britannic's fate was sealed. Amid controlled panic, the evacuation began. Lifeboats were launched, and incredibly, most made it out without incident. However, some of the lifeboats, due to the ship's still-present motion, ended up being sucked into the slowly spinning propellers, resulting in tragic losses. Despite the urgency of the situation, the vast majority of the 1,065 people on board were saved, but sadly, 30 lives were lost that fateful morning. Within about 55 minutes of the explosion, the Britannic sank completely beneath the crystal-clear waters of the Aegean Sea. The sight of this giant succumbing so quickly was a stunning and sad spectacle, one that no one on board would ever forget. For a ship that never made a commercial voyage, the end of the Britannic was a poignant reminder of the dangers of the sea and war. The wreckage of the Britannic lay silent for nearly 60 years until it was rediscovered by famed explorer Jacques Cousteau in 1975. Cousteau and his team conducted a series of dives at the site, revealing the remains of the Britannic resting in about 400 feet of water near the island of Kea in Greece. Investigations into the wreck have uncovered both answers and new mysteries about exactly how she met her end. The wreck of the Britannic continues to fascinate divers and historians to this day. Despite being at an accessible depth, the wreck site requires skill and preparation, attracting explorers from around the world who want to glimpse a significant piece of naval history. She is one of the largest shipwrecks known and offers a stunning glimpse into naval design and history in the early 20th century. Thus ends the story of the Britannic, the ship that had the potential to be the largest and most luxurious on the seas, but whose legacy was sealed by the murky waters of war and fate. She reminds us of the dangers inherent in the golden age of ocean liners and the lessons that followed from the events that marked a golden age of seafaring. A story that not only reflects the grandeur and tragedies of the past, but also the resilience and spirit of innovation that shape our understanding of what it means to sail the seas. So that's today's video. I hope you liked it. See you in the next story.